Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who is celebrating his first year of recording podcasts.
Tim Longo, yes,
hey,
right.
That's right.
Is this an anniversary?
We are actually, as we're recording, we are 3 days past the first first time we recorded.
I didn't even think about it. I guess, yeah, episode 51, so we must have been close.
Yeah, we missed one when you went to Switzerland or whatever. Yeah. So we're off by one, but
4th of July.
Yep. So we,
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, you too.
Sometimes
I was looking at the file dates, and I was like, oh, February 25th. Now, we didn't release. You remember we got two in the can before we released our first one, so our actual, first podcast didn't come out for another week from now, but we actually recorded it a few days and a year ago. So wow,
that's awesome. Yeah, I figured it was coming, but you see the dates and stuff, and I didn't go back to do the research. But awesome. Yeah.
We've come a long way, audio quality wise too. So.
Oh, I bet.
That first one is rough.
Yeah, I don't want to go and listen to it. In fact.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right. That's right. We had some in the can. We actually thought this through a little bit.
We did a little bit, and then we were like, "But it makes no sense." Then if we have feedback, it's like weeks before we get to it.
Yeah. So
we just quickly do it every week. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done some reflecting in our New Year's episode and stuff, but I'm proud of the year. Especially our guests. I've been continually surprised at getting people on.
Yeah, no, that's been a wonderful part of it for sure. Anyway, that's enough yay us. Let's get back to our game. People are here for the game.
Mm-hmm.
We've been playing Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, and this is our second episode on that. We played up to, I guess his name is Zephon.
Zephon, yeah.
The unwilling host to a parasitic swarm. So yeah, we had a couple boss battles this time. We'll probably get to all of that. Do you want to start diving in just with sort of the character design behind Raziel in particular, and then maybe we can talk about other characters as well?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'm forgetting what we talked about last time and wanting to hit there, other than just things off the top of my head. Pretty memorable character.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about his design at all, other than to liken him to Lucifer in Paradise Lost. So we haven't talked at all about sort of his appearance on screen, sort of just like visual stuff or other aspects of the character. So I think it's an open book at this point. Yeah,
and I think that he's like, we've talked a lot about the thematic the thematic tone of the game and really the franchise being kind of that gothic side of things, and it's actually getting a lot more gothic and horror like than I realized, I guess, as we're playing, especially with Zephon and some of this stuff in the Cathedral section that we'll talk about. But it's an interesting mixture. To speak generally for a second, I think one of the other surprises for me is it's an interesting mixture of a lot of the tropes that tend to be, kind of the pulp, the pulpiness and the science fiction fantasy side of things, because it's got vampires and it's got zombies essentially and knights and cathedrals and humans, and Raziel himself just being this kind of interesting kind of fallen angel figure, as we talked about, but being kind of a vampire, but also this ethereal kind of planeswalker, and some pretty strong choices with his visual character design, with his missing jaw and this kind of, they made a point of it in the opening cinematic to show his sort of scarf that he wears kind of falling on him. I don't remember where that came from. I guess he was wearing it before he was thrown. It was
his cloak, I believe.
Okay,
and then he turns it into this scarf to cover his deformity, basically. Yeah. But he's also the most colorful character in the game. He's this kind of purple and blue, mottled flesh, he wears his bruises all over his whole body, right? I mean, he was this beautiful pale white alabaster thing, and now he's this blue thing. Yeah. My teenage son came in while I was playing, and of course I had to show him the soul sucking animation. But he was also like, man, those guys' calves are ripped, which is a thing, right? I mean, you want to make your character's silhouette stand out.
Yeah.
And I think that as simple as these characters are in the PlayStation 1 era, you need to make choices like that to make the characters stand out a little bit on the screen. And make sense visually. You don't have a lot of polygons to play with, but accentuating details, can kind of pull the eye, in different ways. So,
yeah, and I think as a like a minor segue to a broader topic I'll talk more about later, but I've been impressed with some of the, I guess what I'd like to think is pretty like cohesively thought through, visual design with gameplay design kind of all connected together, which, and with the exception of puzzles, which I'll talk about later, but the concept that, like, in his story as a character, right, we see that his wings are ripped from him, and there's this fallen angel kind of motif, etc. But then there's because of the glide mechanic, at least for me, every time you glide, you're kind of reminded about that character moment. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's not only is it a really important and semi-fun thing to do from a gameplay perspective, but it actually directly relates to his history and, in a way, what you might sort of the sympathy you might have for him. Right. Because the wings that he has now, the skin flaps, I don't even know what they really are at this point. They're really kind of like sad and frail and delicate, and
yeah, I mean, he's a shadow of his former self, just like the world is a shadow of its former self, I guess.
Yeah.
And the same, the same thing is true of the. And we should probably talk about the character animation too, because I think that's such a strong part of reinforcing the character design. Yeah, but when he pulls that mask away from his face, if you move the camera around, you can actually see, he's got no lower jaw. Yeah. He's essentially a skull on a pike, and he does that thing where he's sucking in the souls or whatever. But that's at the same time reinforcing what he's gone through, right? That, he suffered for a long, long time, and parts of him rotted away, and only his vampiric nature has kind of remained. So when he pulls away that mask, it's sort of like Darkman, right? Where he covers up most of his face so that nobody will see, how horrible he looks.
Yeah.
There's some I don't know, there's like pride there that he's got, like he's hiding the fact that he is a mess.
Yeah.
And and that's still, I mean, that very much ties into like Lucifer as well, from Paradise Lost. So
and kind of the Phantom of the Opera kind of feeling too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yep.
And I think I'm going back to my point. I'm kind of getting stuck on what you were just saying there, as far as like the reflection of his past, even in that animation as well. But even just the core concept that we talked about last time of the slowly losing energy when he's in the material realm, that is another reinforcement of his story, that where the mechanics of the game reinforce his story, where he actually is no longer of the material plane. He is the Soul Reaver or whatever, and he lives in the ethereal primarily, but he can go to the material realm if, basically at a sacrifice. Once you get the Soul Reaver sword, then it doesn't drain if you're maxed up. But anyway, that I still love that concept of that resource being part of his persona. And I guess I've just been surprised, and I think it's probably a reason why this game in particular did resonate with people, and why it still is kind of kept up there in this sort of genre as one of those top ones. because I'm actually been surprised at how cohesive some of that stuff really is, and how kind of, I guess, economically done but well thought through it is. I mean, I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they really thought that all through, and it's something that Amy seems to be good at.
There's sort of multiple elements of the character design. I mean, we've talked a little about the sort of visual and dynamic aspects of the character, in terms of animation, but as you point out, there's also sort of a narrative design of the character, and those things do seem very tied together here in a way that, I mean, not to pick on anybody, but, something that comes a little bit later is like, Jack and Daxter. They're cool, good characters and everything, or Crash Bandicoot for that matter, to put it in the same, the same genre-ish and the same, same point in time, what's a Bandicoot? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's kind of from a more abstract, strange, Mario sort of place than this is. Where this is more tying together, things that reinforce every other element. It's ludonarrative consonance. Rather than dissonance, right?
Wow, nice. Wow, throwing out the big words tonight. I see. Mm-hmm. I was going to get in there, just the ludonarrative dissonance at some point, but you beat me to it, so nice work.
Thank you. Yep.
Well, I guess to call in an even more recent example that is completely in line with all of this, Uncharted, and I haven't played 4, so I have to fully admit that. I hear that there's some stuff in there that kind of helps bridge this problem that they've always had, but when it comes to mechanics matching character, one of the weird, kind of unfair but also kind of fair criticisms that franchise always gets is the action gameplay side of it not really fitting completely well with the rest of the narrative fantasy of it, right? Because he's basically a psychopathic, murderer and killing so many people, but he's kind of that lovable swashbuckler as well, and and those kind of don't fit, albeit probably fun to play as a shooter, but they don't really fit together. While here, and the other surprising thing for Soul Reaver for me is that it actually, I guess I had in my head that it was a heavy combat game, but it's actually not. It's really an adventure game and primarily a puzzle and navigation game, and combat is almost an afterthought. And
it feels like it.
It does.
I mean, it's very simple. I mean, there's the interesting mechanic of the sort of, and I think the Wraith Blade kind of adds to that. The Soul Reaver blade, when it's shattered, becomes this Wraith Blade thing, and that's actually a nice, powerful, immediate upgrade from what you had before. But that kind of I don't know where I was going. I kind of got lost there in taking an aside.
Well, were you going to talk about like the coup de grace, kind of like that if you keep it charged up, and then
keeping it charged up, and I don't know, it reinforces a lot of stuff that's going on with this sort of propelling things on. Like you don't want to waste time on combat. You're meant to sort of dispatch the critters, and actually, I think in this section we'll get there, but in this sort of Silence Cathedral, which was most of the bulk of the time we played this time, there are several places where I'm like, just let me get back to the things that it's strong at. Stop sending me back to the other world. You sort of get to a point where you're like, okay, well, I lost the Soul Reaver. I guess I'll just go to the other dimension and get it back so that I can take this thing on a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Not my favorite from that standpoint.
No. Well, and that, I guess, as another segue to another point I wanted to make in this area is, and kind of relating to my surprise about what the game actually seems to be focusing on, another connection point to the narrative and the character, basically, motifs, is this concept that you can't really die.
Right.
You just go to the other realm. And so, at least for me mentally, there is to your point, there's an inconvenience of time and kind of, distraction from combat, in that if you're not good at it and you die from it, then you have to kind of go to the other realm and then come back, and there's a whole rigmarole to do there. But at the very least, for me, there's a mental shift where I don't worry as much,
right?
Because I don't feel like death doesn't.
Well, it makes it way easier to experiment.
And also, like, I feel like I'm not punished when I don't feel as punished if I miss a jump or if I don't get a puzzle right away, or you know what I mean. There's just the stakes are not the same, but it works because the character is already described to me why it is this way,
Right. Versus
I think the other example that comes to mind that I always love as a modern example is the Arkham games, and with Asylum being sort of that. And we talked a lot about it actually in the early days of Tomb Raider 2, but when he falls, he doesn't. Most of the time, Batman doesn't die. The camera cuts and he climbs back up on the last ledge you were on.
Right.
Because that's more in character to what Batman would do, right? He wouldn't just fall to his death all the time. He would actually swing around and try again or something. He still feels like a badass, and
right.
And so they found a clever presentational way to make something like falling to your death multiple times from a jump fit the character, and so this concept of you're dying but you're not really dying, I don't know, it's just kind of an elegant solution.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've always thought, if I ever got to make an Indiana Jones game, I would make him not able to die as long as you hit some buttons. Like,
you said that before.
He always gets through it, right? I mean, that's what we expect of the character, and that's what we, and it would be humorous, right? And we love that about him, and you're right, with Batman, and Arkham, we maintain he's unbeatable, sort of, and he just does things to survive, and you just reinforce that about the character. Yeah, and I do love that. I mean, this is a character who's already experienced an eternity at the bottom of a pit of boiling acid or whatever.
He can't go any lower.
Yeah, he's been through a lot.
He can't die more.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hope we get to talk to someone about that stuff, because I'd really like to know how planned and intentional that really was, or whether they, it's the age-old question, I guess, from the design perspective of like, hey, did you guys have the idea of planeswalking first, or did that come from the character story or the world story? Because I'm almost positive that wasn't in the first game. And again, as we talked about, the first game was a completely different genre to begin with. So basically Soul Reaver, this particular game, came from someone's head in that they were starting kind of from scratch, other than Kain is in it, and
right.
There really isn't. There's not much of a connection from a gameplay perspective. So I don't know.
Yeah, and then furthermore, or did it come from a mechanical desire to not have basically holdovers from the arcade days?
Yeah, that's.
Right? I mean, there's no lives, and at this point, I mentioned, Medieval last time. That's a game that has lives, and. Ghosts and Goblins, and
Ghosts and Goblins came to mind too.
Yeah, they're games that basically have lives mechanics, and that was the sort of thing that even deep into the PS2 era, there were a lot of people many people hadn't dealt with. Hadn't been willing to take that on. These days we have reload. We try to reload more quickly, I guess. I mean, there's still games that don't.
Yeah.
It's not that they have a lives thing. I mean, very few games end after you've died 3 or 4 times or whatever. It's more like, try this challenge infinitely, but they don't try to address it in their fiction, and there's not a mechanic for it. So, yeah.
The example that I think we've talked about, maybe we haven't, I don't know why we would have, but Sands of Time, right? Like that, Prince of Persia Sands of Time is also the ultimate example of a well-motivated mechanic of save game and checkpoint, replaying checkpoints, integrating it into the style and presentation of the game, right? Where he's kind of he's telling a story essentially. Exactly. And if you fail a jump, it's like, oh, that didn't happen that way, and they rewind it, and you get to try again. and just really elegantly done, pre-Assassin's days. But
for sure.
so there's some good. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I just kind of related to that. I made a note down here that there was kind of an interesting. I don't know if we want to jump into sort of like some of the next steps that let's playing, but I was going to talk about the Kain battle. So let's see. Last episode we I don't even remember Malchiah.
Malchiah, right? Is
that guy's name? The first boss, right? And pretty simple boss to figure out how to kill, and you get the. I don't really know what story points to make there. They kind of just taunt each other a little bit and then get on with it.
I mean, it seems like there's all this kind of rivalry between the various vampires who've been living up under Kain's rule, and yourself, and they all remember you. It's like, oh, look, it's you. Yeah. Like, despite the fact that you look totally different. Welcome back.
Well, I mean, they look totally different too, right? I mean,
yes,
from the opening cutscene, they were all bipedal humanoids, right?
Yeah.
And they've all been basically,
degraded in some way.
Yeah, and just like some metamorphosis has happened, or some sort of like terrible things have happened to them through the course of this Kain's rule and the world going to hell. And they kind of talk about how the world isn't what it used to be and all this stuff. And I guess talking back to kind of general character design, I've been surprised how. I don't know what I was expecting in this regard either, but these bosses are just completely crazy in a kind of a cool way for gothic horror kind of stuff, and pretty extreme, and very adult for the time. I bet you that is another reason that this was resonating with people and kind of became a cult classic, especially Zephon. Like, that character design is wacko, and that not to jump ahead, but that the base of him with that mound of flesh and
pretty nasty.
Yeah,
we'll get there, because I definitely want to talk about the Zephon boss battle and some really good stuff that's done there. In a lot of ways. So
Malchiah, so you get the ability from him once you kill him, that you can go through grates, basically, right? Phase through grates when you're in the spectral plane. And so that unlocks, that's the first sort of like Metroidvania kind of Zelda-ish ability you get that allows you to kind of go through places you couldn't go to before. I mean, that battle was interesting.
And the I don't know, the weird one, I forget what the name of the ancient god is, but the Elder One, I guess.
The Elder One, I think.
The Elder One, says at that point, oh, you need to go back to Kain's palace. Now you can get in there.
Yeah.
And I think you even get a little cutscene. So, but you were going to say about the battle.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, as far as like pretty simple. So far, the bosses, all three of them that we fought, have been pretty simple mechanics, and I haven't felt that they've been unfair, and maybe in some cases a little too easy. But I'm kind of okay with that, because it's really not the strength of the game anyway. Mm-hmm. Because like we talked about, the focus of the game tends to be more on level design and puzzle challenges than it is on combat, and so I'm kind of thankful for that. But yeah, you lower these gates as he's this big hulking thing that kind of follows you on all fours or whatever, and you lower these gates, spiky gates onto him to kind of damage him, and then once you do that enough, I don't know, a crank opens up and you crank it, and he just magically ends up in the middle of this meat grinder, so very grotesque stuff.
You gotta time it.
For the center section?
Yeah, maybe you didn't feel like you did. I mean, the thing that you're doing with
I did it all.
The thing you're doing with the two gates is basically unlocking that lever in the middle.
Yeah, but once that lever was unlocked, I just used it, and he just seemed to be in the middle.
Yeah, you may have just gotten lucky there, because I think that you can drop that and have him not be there.
I just completely lucked out then.
Yeah,
I had no idea where he was when I.
Yeah, he'll basically follow you in a straight line. So you want to like jump over. Like the way I got back to the thing was to jump into the cage, jump out of the cage, and then he was following me on a straight line.
I must have done that then.
Yeah, he must have done something like that. So, but then you go. So you go back to Kain. And another interesting thing is that the enemies, these bosses, are more like monochromatic. Kain less so, but these other two are kind of like, I don't know, they're kind of more beige, and washed out. They look more like the environment and less like Raziel himself. So there's some more kind of interesting character design going on there, that they're all ancient and, shriveled and gross, and perverse in some way. So you go in, there's some critters to battle, and I think we'll mostly not talk about those sorts of combats, but you basically make your way into Kain's inner sanctum, through use of this sort of walking through the grates and all that stuff. And you have a battle where he's like got this powerful sword, the Soul Reaver, which was probably, I have to imagine, part of the first game. Maybe
I'm going to do some research.
Ultimate weapon type thing.
I want to see what the deal is. I also want to know if all of these characters you're going after were in the first game too. All the lieutenants. But go on.
Oh yeah, fair point. And his is kind of an interesting. His is kind of an interesting battle, just in that you basically just keep getting sent to the spiritual realm, and then coming out and trying to race over and hit Kain a couple times before he sends you back again.
Yeah.
And it's sort of just like the relentlessness of your character, like we talked about last time, this being a revenge fantasy, and how they're based on propulsion and just kind of trying to keep that pace going. That first, encounter with Kain feels very much like the perfect instantiation of that. Like, you send me here, you send me to hell, I'm coming right back.
Yeah.
And you send me to hell again, and I'm coming right back. And it's like immediate and fast, and good. Frustrating at times because the
timing
it takes
was
a while.
hard.
Yeah, the timing was hard. You have to kind of like line up the camera in advance of where you think you're going to be going, and then you have this new character arrive after you've shattered the sword that Kain uses, the Soul Reaver. And now you get it. You basically get its spirit, in a way, to become part of you. To this sword, the Wraith Blade, I guess is what he calls it, the elder one. And then this woman, ghost, angel, spirit character, Ariel shows up, and she just. I don't know what's going on with her yet, but she definitely feels like a character out of in the same way, kind of out of the Christian, various representations of the big Christian story. So maybe she's part Beatrice, maybe she's part angel, but there's something going on.
Something more going on there. Yeah. To the Kain moment, at one point that I wrote down in my notes was, which I think is an interesting motif going back to our previous conversation, is Kain basically, I guess I'm not sure if he knows, but I know as a player he can't kill me. Like, he's the biggest badass that there is in the game, probably, right? Like, he's Kain, he's the leader, he's the king. But I kind of know in my anti-hero kind of way that as a character I have nothing to fear, right? Because it's like it's almost like, and I know I'm overthinking it, but it's almost like Raziel as a character is the ultimate example of destiny, because his destiny will be like it's almost
he will
impossible.
Not be denied.
Right, it's almost impossible for him to fail because he can't be killed. And so, and then when the sword breaks, Kain kind of gives you an impression that it was supposed to happen. Right. So he's kind of like, he kind of turns it on you and kind of like, haha, that's what I want to have happen. You'll see. So I don't know where that's going, and we'll see down the road. Of course, you're going to win eventually. So there's something interesting going on there. But I just think it's an interesting dynamic that you're not really used to, right? It's usually that the boss character is the all-powerful, and and he actually does literally kill you multiple times in this battle, but you're always going to come back. So
yeah.
It's just a rare dynamic you don't really see very often.
Yeah, it is highly unusual. Usually it's the player coming back, right? The player loses, right? You go back to some checkpoint.
It's a gamification.
You watch another cutscene, cutscene again, and then you fight. So it really puts directly into the game what the player's experience normally is, which is I'm just gonna keep trying until I get better at it. But it takes out that loop that's so frustrating of having to redo something or have to figure out the weakness. I mean, like I said, it's an aid to experimentation in that you can. Like, I didn't immediately know what I was supposed to do. I tried hiding behind walls, to see if I could get closer, and the energy would just kind of go through the walls and get me. I'm like, okay, well, that's not going to work. Maybe if I hide behind his throne, I just tried different things. And none of it worked. And then I was like, well, maybe I just got to go hit him, and it makes it easy to go and find those solutions. So
experimentation.
Moving on from there, we go to the Silenced Cathedral, I think is what it's called. Yeah. Which is, from what I gathered, and I had to look something up this time because I had a bug in the game, as I did last time. So far, 2 for 2, where something didn't work despite me doing the right thing. And I learned that this is actually kind of the biggest level in the game. So that's kind of nice. Kind of nice to know we got that behind us.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty complex.
Before we get to the Cathedral, I wanted to just kind of tell my quick story about navigation. One of the frustrations I have with the world design, when it comes to directional orientation, is just not great. And so, the Elder One will give you... After you kill bosses, basically, he gives you some voice line cue, usually, about where to go next.
Right.
But they're very... Go to the east, right?
Where the mountains are, and you're like, huh?
They're very riddle-like, right? And first of all, there are no mountains. You can't see... It was like, what are you talking about? East, I have no idea what direction that is. And part of it is just they want you to... There's no map, right? There's no identification of what area you're in wherever you stand, right? Even when you go through the portals, which I think is ridiculous because the portals are the perfect place to tell you where you are. You have to memorize the glyphs. But and I looked in the manual. I don't think they even tell you in the manual. But... So I basically got lost at that point, and I probably spent half hour, 45 minutes just going back over the world to try to find where to go next.
Where am I supposed to go?
And it ended up being not far from Kain's thing, right, ultimately, but it goes back to what I was saying in the first episode where just the visual language and the camera work, etc., or lack thereof, just... is not conducive to hiding routes around corners or especially with the draw distance being so short, it's easy to miss stuff. And if you think you've been to a place where you're like, oh, it's not there because I've already been there and I've seen it, you could have been there and the thing's there, but you just didn't see it. Right. And so you kind of check that box out of your mind and you don't go back to that place because you think it's not the right answer. But I don't know. It's just very frustrating. And so I had to look up on a map to see where the cathedral was at all. And then what's more, once I quit and came back into the game, I hadn't found a portal. And so I couldn't find the cathedral a second time. And I spent another half hour because I didn't want to cheat again. So anyway, I'm frustrated with the world design because it's trying to be, I think, that kind of connected hub and spoke Metroid kind of world, but I don't think they succeeded at making that an elegant, world layout.
I think that there's a real tension there. This is one of those areas where there's dissonance between what the designer wants you to do and the world presentation. Because, in a Metroid game, they just, first of all, you have a map, they literally just change the color. It's like, oh, this area is where you want to go next. It's this color, this other colored area on the map, so you're in a different section. You kind of know as you've gone, like, oh, I haven't done anything in this green area, and, that's missing here.
It's hard to tell. Yeah,
it's a fairly consistent and open world, really. Right? It's there's no level loads.
It's all streaming
unless you go through a gate. So it's the world, the glyph thing. I can see that. I mean, I myself had gotten lucky I had actually, before I even battled Kain, I was kind of going around to areas where I had seen those pizza wedges that you can get to improve your health.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I had noticed a couple. Oh, I haven't gotten a full set yet, I don't think.
You know why? It's because I got lost. So I kept backtracking forever, and I found all the old ones that we passed.
Yeah, so I knew there was a gate that I had passed, and I went and found that. I was like, oh, yeah, I want to go through this. And that took me exactly to where I want to go, and found me the glyph transport, there as well. The sort of, so I just kind of lucked into that, and then I went and did Kain, and then it said, "Oh, you need to go here," and I was like, "Oh, I know exactly where that is. I'll just go take the gate." In fact, I just saved at that point and quit, and then came back, and I was like, "Oh, now I can just take the gate because I've already established that link." Yeah.
See, I was afraid of that. I think I'm missing Portal. I think I've missed a couple, like since the last one, I guess. The Malkaya.
Right before Malkaya, there's one, I think.
The next one after that I got was the Zephon one.
Oh, right before. Yeah, there's one. There's one. There's
one or two.
Yeah, you missed just one.
Okay.
At least that I noticed.
I just have that sinking feeling where.
Yeah. Well, there's some others that I've missed. There's like gaps, where I can't walk through. So I've missed something, but
yeah.
But the cathedral itself has like this big entrance with like an arched kind of path that goes up and into it. Directly opposite of that is a path back into some canyon, and if you just keep following that back, you ultimately make a gate.
Oh, okay.
So there's one in there.
These gates are so important. I just feel like they need to be more the layout. Like, I really generally have a pretty good sense of direction in games, like almost always. And I don't know what it is about this game, but I am getting turned around constantly. I think to your point, the texture work is inconsistent and
nondescript.
And nondescript, yeah. I mean, they have interesting texture work in it, but they mix it all together per area. So like you couldn't even distinguish all the time which area you're in. I think that probably will change over time, but at least where we've been so far hasn't been, other than maybe the kind of the end of the cathedral and maybe Kain's fortress. Those are kind of distinct, but otherwise, yeah. Anyway,
yeah. So I mean, the cathedral is kind of the area where we really get into a lot more sort of environmental puzzles. We've got a few different types of puzzles. We've got block puzzles. We've got the sort of the turning on this organ, and I love the idea. I love the idea that this thing just repels vampires by blasting out hymns or something.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the perfect, like I can just see the pitch meeting now where they're just like, okay, this is our gothic horror game, and we're gonna have a level that is one giant organ.
Yeah,
and I mean, it's just
no. I mean, like a pipe organ.
Yeah, right. Not a heart, but
yeah. I'm not talking about like ventricles here.
But it's so like talk about Fan of the Opera. It's like it's so melodramatic and perfect for like and then
or Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah, right, and not to jump that too much, but the part of the puzzles that kind of all is related to turning the organ on in the air really relate well with, again, the mechanics, right? Where it's like he's a glider.
Right.
And so turning air on and having him glide upwards, but also at the same time turning this organ on, which I guess now that I think about it, they don't really pay that off, do they? You kind of turn everything on, but it's not like the organ ever really like...
Yeah, it's not like it kills... Yeah, it doesn't really kill a bunch of, vampires or...
Yeah.
It would be kind of cool, if like all
Zephon, if somehow the boss battle would have included it.
Yeah, no, you're right. That would have been good. So I there's some block puzzles in here. They're not super interesting. I mean, they are kind of interesting in that you're like, again, trying to connect up maybe airflow and make things, connect the pipes and make the pipes turn on. But I was really frustrated because this is where I ran into a bug. There's a couple of bells that you can ring and a big stained glass window. And I looked at it, and it was like there are literally bell motifs on it as a visual indicator, like, this has something to do with these bells. And I hit one of the bells, and then I went down, and I went through a wrong door somewhere trying to find the other bell. And when I came out, ringing that first bell no longer sustained the note anymore. Because you basically need to have them both ringing at the same time. And turns out it's after you do one of the specific block puzzles. When you come out of that door, that bell will do that. But once you've done it once, it won't do it again unless you go back through that door and back out again. So
it's like a script logic bug or something?
Yeah, scripting bug, or just like a resetting of the state or something like that nobody thought through. So it's just like, I know what to do. I'm like, this has got to be what I'm going to do. And I keep doing it. I was trying to do it faster. Like, maybe I'm just not doing fast enough. And I mean, just like super frustrating.
Yeah.
I spent at least half an hour there, 45 minutes, just like, what am I doing wrong? I know this is going to be a thing. And I looked it up, and it's like, you do this. I'm like, I did that. I've been doing that. That's all I've been doing.
How did you find? Did you find out somebody talked about the bug, or did you fix the bug yourself?
No. I just, at that point, I used my game developer brain, and I said, okay, I know that this is the thing to do. What is wrong with this? I've already run into a bug with this game, so what's going on here? And I thought, I'll just go back to where I solved the last puzzle, and I'll come back out and see what happens. And that, of course, was all I needed to do. So it was just kind of like a game developer knowledge thing of like, okay, well, they probably set the state when you finish this puzzle or when you go through the door. I can't finish the puzzle again. So I just kind of reasoned my way through, like, okay, well, this is the simplest thing to test, to see if this would work, and it did. So I got lucky there. Yeah. I did like that, how that tied into the next part of the puzzle, which was that this sliding block was going to push away, but it was going to move back too fast for you to get there, and shattering the glass was basically your way of having a path back that didn't involve opening a door. So that now you could use the spirit realm and basically stop time in the material world. I did like that. I thought that was great. I just was really frustrated at that point.
Yeah. So, actually, to backtrack some, you remember I got stuck last episode because I didn't get to the boss right in time because
Malchiah, yeah.
And to your point about that you're just making about that particular puzzle, the one other frustration I have is I don't know what the solution would be, but when the solution to the puzzle relates to going to the ethereal realm on purpose, they don't do a good job, well, really any job of
signaling
that or having any visual language. And where I got stuck getting up to Malchiah was there was a room that when you go to the material plane, there's these blocks that come out of the wall because it morphs, and so you can climb up higher.
Yeah, when you're in the spectral realm. Yeah,
when you're in the spectral realm. Sorry, yeah. And I had
because the world sort of twists and bad things.
Yeah, but it's not. It doesn't twist consistently.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
There are no rules to it. Which I actually have a technical question I wanted to ask you about that later. So anyway, that I learned my lesson there. I literally probably spent about 45 minutes on that problem. And then I was like, well, what am I not seeing? And so I backtracked everything in the spectral realm and then kind of found that spot. So I do love that they use that as a puzzle mechanic, but yeah, just frustrating on how they
now I'm ready for it, I guess.
Yeah.
So now it's something I'm always going to try, and at several points when I didn't know what to do next, I would try that. That'd be the first tool I would reach for in the toolkit. So I sort of get it, and now that I'm sort of getting the rules, like as far as the time, objects not moving, and like, oh, okay,
the time thing makes sense. Cool.
The thing where it actually moves blocks out of the wall, I agree.
Well,
unfair, honestly,
unfair,
just really not fair.
And I think if it wasn't so cumbersome to go back and forth, and I think some games I'm trying to think of, there's been some time manipulation games that have done sort of similar things, not as maybe elegantly, but in that you like when you're in one realm or the other, you get kind of signals about what the state change will be, because there's there's another area in this area with the pipes, where you actually have to go to the spectral realm because the pipes bend, so you can actually climb up them. But there's there's just no clue, other than just happening upon it. And you actually even have to go into the spectral realm and kind of make sure you're looking in the right place.
Right, yeah.
Because, it's just really trial and error. And I think one of my least favorite parts of this game right now is really the level design gets in your way. Like, it gets in the way of the enjoyment of the game because it is kind of obfuscating what you need to do sometimes as part of the gameplay, whether it be hiding a door or hiding a switch or hiding this pipe thing in the spectral realm. It's like, we're clever. We're kind of hiding this thing from you that you need to see, and the gameplay of it is just, can you find it?
Right. And this is that mad dungeon master that you've had who has one solution to a problem, and you're going to sit in this room and have no fun, until you find it.
You find it. Yeah. It's got to be
the one solution, that they have in mind.
Yeah, so it's good D&D reference. Nice.
Yeah. So totally get it. And for me, I definitely had a case here where I was. So there's kind of multiple steps, as we said. There's some block puzzles. Later on, there's sort of these three pipes that power. There's pipes that power this sort of main thing to blow you up, and then there's these three pipes that feed into one to actually blow you up to where Zephon is, so you can have the final battle in the Cathedral. It took me forever to find, and numerous pipes are broken up. Like, they have parts that are not connected, and you just have to go and push them over.
Yeah.
And for me, I found the first one, I was like, okay, that's cool, and then I had no idea.
Yeah, me too.
I have no idea where these other ones are, and I just kept backtracking, and then I went forward again, and I went back again, and that can be frustrating because, of course, monsters respawn, and, at this point, some of those are more difficult. I haven't really gotten a hang of dodging attacks and things like that. And
no, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I really feel like
I think it might be because we're using the sticks.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I think maybe. It's more of a button mashy game than we sort of feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
That's definitely a combo kind of thing. Like, hit this button and hit the jump button and an arrow. To avoid being attacked. That's not as comfortable when you're using a stick. So I feel like that might be part of it.
Could be.
But and I mean, they do signal what they're going to do. It's not like I don't see it coming. I just always am like, now I've lost the Wraith Blade. I might as well just switch over and.
Well, and that I want to put a flag in another topic related to that of animation priority that I want to talk about later. So remind me to come back to that. Because it impacts the combat and some other things. But yeah, to your point about the pipes, like, not only that, but I found that the first pipe I found was the one that was sort of deeper into that series of rooms and puzzles, which were kind of like, in my opinion, a lot of non sequitur rooms, if you know what I mean, where it's sort of like these are really just random hallways and rooms that somebody put together and they textured. Like, there's no rhyme or reason or architecture or anything that tells me what is going on. They're just pipes that ran, you know what I mean? And I like to have a little more thoughtfulness in the architecture and layout of things.
It's very. I think it's meant to evoke something that's very Baroque,
Yeah.
But here it's more broke.
Right. Oh my god! Did you just say that?
Yeah.
Oh jeez. I said it. Damn it.
That was a double whammy.
It was a double, yeah. But Baroque is an actual style that exists, in architecture, right? Like Baroque doesn't mean you get to make stuff up. Anyway,
right. That's true. It's not very logical or consistent.
I like some of that, and I would even say earlier Tomb Raider games did a better job at that. But anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, the pipes. the two pipes that I was missing to get the full set of 3 were right in the beginning of the section when you first come up, when I finally found them, I was like, I passed them right away. Exactly. I could have done these right off the bat.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was what was so frustrating to me, because I went all the way in to find the first one that I knocked over. I'm like, okay. And then it showed, and it basically gave you a cutscene of like, oh, there's 3, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I can't go any further in, I don't think.
Yeah,
I can't
you
climb
found
up
everything
from here. Yeah, so I went all the way back out, basically to that point, but not into the actual big, wind tunnel.
They just don't give any indication about what...
Yeah, and then I'm like, well, I must have missed something. So I went all the way back through. And I'm like, oh, man. Yeah, and then I went all the way back out again, and I'm like, I don't even know. Because it doesn't give you enough... Yeah, it just really didn't do a good job of allowing you to make a mental map of how this stuff would all be constructed. I followed those pipes back, and I'm like, well, it must be... these must take me back there to where they are. And it was only by luck that I basically fell. I mean, I was like, oops. I walked off a ledge and fell back into that thing. I started gliding up again, and I'm like, oh, there they are. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows how long I might have spent on that otherwise.
And then,
well, let's... Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, let's hit Zephon, quickly, because, we're
getting up on time,
minutes. Yeah.
So anyway, so Zephon. Let's hit Zephon now. So you get up to the top of that final pipe, which you're like... You've glided up 3 times now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's the 3rd time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you glide up to where he is. There's actually a glyph gate there as well. That is basically where I saved and quit for a while and then came back to it a couple days later. I think Zephon's boss design is great. It's basically a stationary boss, and he's turned into like some crazy insect. He's enormous. And then he's got this
like a big... fleshy praying mantis or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the Queen and Aliens in a way.
Yeah.
Though more, but with more like legs. More insect-like kind of legs.
And his face opens up is really interesting design.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of good stuff there. Very, very good work on the character art.
I was looking at the credits. I realized... somebody that I know from Crystal, Dan Kabuko, was the character art lead and character designer. He's not at Crystal anymore, but I think he was a character designer on this. So,
I think I met Dan when I came out that time.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's really that's a really good thing. One of the things I really like about it is that as you come into that room, you walk past this, I assume, human body that's been split in half.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, that's very efficient. Like, it's not just window dressing. It's actually important that there's this, half body with a torch in its hands that you walk right past. Like, you can't miss it. And it actually works well with the sort of camera and the camera distance because there's not a lot to look at that point because the boss is basically shrouded in shadow, and you're kind of making your way in, and it's a really good moment. It kind of reminded me of Ultima Underworld in a way, because the draw distance being what it was, and having just that sort of torch as a point of interest, visual interest as I walked in.
Yeah, I only have one tiny quibble with that torch guy on the ground. I had been trained up to this point that torches can be picked up. Yeah, it can be.
I know, same thing.
So I was thinking, at one point I was like, I got to get fire over this guy somehow. So maybe that was a good thing ultimately for the solution, but still a little bit inconsistent. But good. Yeah, and it was I like one-room bosses like that, that are stationary and stuff like you said. And
so you get a whack at his legs first. There's kind of stages there, but if you've got that wraith blade, I mean, you're just kind of cutting through things like that, like butter, and then once you've wailed away on all of those, you can hit its belly and have it like pop out an egg or something. I don't want to speculate. And the ultimate solution is that you need to light those on fire and throw it at them. A couple, 2, 3, or whatever. Probably 3, because it's always 3 in games.
And in this game in particular, I think it's been 3 every time.
Yeah, hit Kain 3 times.
Yeah.
Hit Malchiah 3, third time's the thing that kills him. Yeah, you're probably right. Which is also a special Christian number. So
I don't think I had to take all the legs out either. I think maybe those are optional.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I took a couple out.
Just made it easier.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know what to do yet, so I just kept hitting those whenever they'd appear, and I'd whack at it. I was like, oh, whoa, I better get that. And I did the same thing where it's like, oh, I'm just going to jam this torch into its belly. Was my plan.
Yeah.
But then you can't pick it up.
Well, the other interesting thing is they also have taught you that I think is a little interesting. I mean, I give them a pass on this one because it's hard to, it would be hard to solve. But you've also been taught that when you see doors with holes in them, that the way to open that door is to use the Soul Reaver weapon. You know
true.
what I mean?
Right.
And so that initially I thought, okay, there's the hole in that thing. Belly. And so I have to go in there and kind of, so I thought for a while I had to I kept powering myself up so I got the blade back so I could go in there to try to stick the blade into the hole, but that wasn't the solution. So tricky inconsistencies with some visual language stuff that, but overall very good.
Strong boss. All right, let's take a quick break because we need to figure out where we're playing to next, and we'll come back and do a little bit of feedback and email and talk about next time.
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. We're talking Soul Reaver, Legacy of Kain, and we're going to take in a little bit of feedback. I think, Tim, you have the first one.
Yes. So this is from Scott Nebel, or Nebel.
Nabel.
Or Nabel, from North Carolina, yeah. So hi, guys. I, like probably a lot of your listeners, first heard of you guys after the Kotaku article. I'm hoping it was Kotaku. Yes, it was. About your Final Fantasy IX podcast. Being a huge Final Fantasy fan, especially of the Super Nintendo and PlayStation entries, I just had to listen, and I've been hooked ever since. Last weekend, I finally got the chance to play along, finally starting up a file with the PS3 HD version of Shadow of the Colossus that I bought back in 2011. My wife was out of town last weekend, so it was perfect opportunity to work my way through all 16 Colossi and listen to the show. I can't believe it only took me 6 years. It only took me 6 years to play this great game, or 12 years if you consider I missed out on the PS2 version as well. On my Sunday morning jog with your show playing through my iPhone, I started to think about how great it would be for you guys to do an entry on the old Legacy of Kain game, Soul Reaver in particular, and found some interesting parallels between Shadow of the Colossus and Soul Reaver's Broken Worlds. Needless to say, I was thrilled when I found out you guys would indeed be tackling, maybe is what he meant there, Soul Reaver next. As a 14-year-old teenager, I had played the original Legacy of Kain on the PlayStation, and it was quite different than anything I was used to, especially compared to NES and Super NES games, and the sequel looked even better. So I got that on day one in August 1999, and I loved it. I've probably played through it at least half a dozen times, just loving soaking in all the atmosphere and lore and voice work, which was incredible. I will tell you, as an avid 32, 64-bit gamer in the mid-90s, I had no real issues that I can remember with the camera. Interesting. I'm not sure if it was if it is what the developer intended, but I made great use of the free look mode in every new area. And I came across trying to scour each room and areas for secrets, much like I did the previous year with Ocarina of Time's first-person looking mode.
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting tie-in.
Yeah, we should talk about that a little bit, because we definitely should. Which I'm also, as an aside, using that free look mode a lot now, so I agree with him there. But anyways, a great first episode on Soul Reaver, and I look forward to you guys tackling the rest of the game. To me, the only fault I can find with this nearly perfect game is that the game was obviously unfinished, and much of the end game was scrapped to get it to release back in 1999. You'll know what I'm talking about when you get to it. I'm not sure if you'll have time to get to all of it in this show, but there's a great website, Legacy of Kain - The Lost Worlds.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes.
Yep, that goes into detail on all the things that got cut from the game, some of which was repurposed for the sequels. Oh, interesting. Thanks again for the great job, and thanks for bringing back some great memories of the times I spent with this special game back in my younger days. Thanks, Scott. That was awesome. That is some irony that you wanted Soul Reaver to come next, and you were thinking about it, and then we chose it. That is like the universe coming together for sure.
Coming together. Yeah, no, it's interesting, because of course, I read this email earlier this week, but prior to that, I had been thinking about sort of the connections and the differences, between. I mean, and he basically touches on two kind of counterpoints. Like you've got Shadow of the Colossus, but also Zelda, and this game is in some ways heir to each. Yeah. I mean, it obviously can't be an heir to Shadow of the Colossus. That came later, but I mean, it sort of is in this kind of space in between the both of them.
There's a Zelda element for sure. Yeah, the one point he made about the camera though, and I haven't played Ocarina in a long time, so I may be wrong on this, but I feel like the Zelda was much better at giving you clues on when free look was needed, versus in this game I feel like I kind of the thing that I need is actually a little off camera, and I have no idea it's there. Right. Yeah. So I kind of have to go into each room and free look, which I feel is unfair. And I think to his point, he played it back in the time when it came out. And I think that the disadvantage we have is we're playing it in the modern era where our expectations are different.
Right.
And I think we're much more we were much more forgiving back in the day. And so I totally get it.
We were. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, I think that what is happening for me, and I kind of alluded to it this episode, is that I fall back on, okay, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I will try this. I'll try backtracking, but I'll try going into the other realm. I'll try free look. So tools. It's like, it's like once I don't know what to do, that's when I reach for them.
Yeah.
Rather than sort of organically using these tools. Like, I mean, so Ocarina of Time, perfect example why you want to use free look is you hear that little sound that the spiders make.
Yes, so that, yeah.
The sculptulas or whatever they're called, and so they make that little sound of them vibrating kind of back and forth on their webs, and it makes you want to go in the free look. And, incidentally, that's also what it looks like when you use the slingshot, right? So, you want to go into that mode, or the bow. So you want to go into that mode anyway, because you're going to take them out that way, because it's the most precise shooting. And here, since there isn't really a shooting component, at least so far, I mean, I don't know if some of these glyphs and things are going to make that happen later. I don't know. There really is. I mean, you can throw the weapons and you can use the free look to make that more precise, but you're not going to actually do that because it's cumbersome. Yeah. Whereas it totally worked in Zelda because all those things that you'd fight with that would be stationary anyway. So there are design choices where it totally makes sense, and they reinforced it and they gave you cues to make you reach for those tools directly in the Zelda game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the tells there were the audio tell is a really good example of some smart design there. And all that being said, Scott, I am enjoying the game, and I can see the charm. Not having played it at the time, I can see the charm that it had on you and why it's kind of in your top game. So, and I love that we're playing it now, and it is one of your favorites. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually thinking back. I think the first game developer cover the first game developer I ever read, the Game Developer magazine is what I'm referring to here. Yeah. There was a magazine that's defunct now for a while now, 4 or 5 years at least. But there was a Game Developer magazine, and I think the first one I ever read had Soul Reaver on the cover.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Yeah.
It would have been it would have been around this time. I feel like I would have been reading it before this, but I don't know. Maybe not. I should go hunt that down.
Good magazine. I forgot about that magazine. Yeah.
It was a great magazine.
I guess maybe Gamma Sutra now has taken that, right?
Yeah, and actually you can get all of those. There's an archive somewhere. They just put all the PDFs up, so you can actually download every game developer magazine.
And Gamma Sutra will publish some stuff from that as an archive sometimes in their articles.
No, that's true. Yeah, they often do, especially the postmortems, which were some of the best features, I thought. And actually, our first game together was a game developer postmortem. Chris Corey wrote one for Starfighter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, I've got the other one. The email subject is Ueda and Legacy of Kain from Jonathan DeLuca. It says, "Hey guys," hey Jonathan. "First of all, I totally love the idea and delivery of your show. It's nice to hear actual developers talk about games from a fan's perspective, but with the knowledge of a developer. Excellent. I started a very modest gaming podcast strictly for fun and as a kind of therapy for myself dedicated to gaming and gaming music, and I'm actually working on a backlog play of Shadow of the Colossus, so I was happy to see you guys talking about that game too. It's truly timeless. When I'm done with that episode dealing with that game, I'll send you a link that you can check out if you're interested." Yes, Jonathan, we are. So go ahead and send that.
Totally.
And we'll forward it on in the show notes that week. Anyway, back to the mail. No pressure. I'm not looking for a plug or anything like that. Oh, too late to be clear. I just figured you might be interested to hear me and a couple guys break down the OST of Shadow and the game itself. Now for Legacy of Kain. Soul Reaver 1 and 2 and Legacy of Kain Defiance are three of my all-time favorite games. Can't wait to hear what you guys think of the narrative, level design, and overall gameplay once you get through these awesome games. I remember being in my early teens, I'll let others do the math, though he gives it, playing these games and recognizing how great the voice acting and story was. I read a decent amount growing up, and I remember thinking that the Raziel trilogy must be based off of some book or novel. I won't spoil anything for you guys, but the whole coin on its edge speech you hear from Kain later on really got my 13-year-old brain thinking about some deep stuff. I could rant about Legacy of Kain forever, but anyway, thanks for the show. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a note specifically for you. He says, "Tim, I don't know if you still work at 343 Industries. I absolutely love the gameplay." He's talking about Halo 5, and I'm straight addicted to the multiplayer. I work about 60 hours a week, and I've managed to put over 1,000 hours into that multiplayer to give you an idea of how much I love it.
Wow.
I don't know if you're still with 343 Industries, and I'm sure you don't mind telling me because it's just your career and reputation on the line, but is Halo 6 secretly going to be a Scorpio launch game or what? What happens with Cortana? I have to know! So that's from Jonathan DeLuca. Can you help us out here?
Okay, so I will. Let me spill the beans here. This is a one-time offer, and so let me start with this. So,
Good.
So there you have it. There's all the answers that you're looking for. And
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I can't even believe it.
You can't believe
there was a little kind of weird fuzz in my headphones, so I hope it's okay. But
okay,
wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Wow,
surprising, huh?
I know, right? I mean, I can't even believe it.
So that's a one-time thing.
Don't expect us to address that again, until the game's out, and of course now you know when. So look forward to it. But in terms of the other stuff, I look forward to hearing his soundtrack discussion. I mean, we don't, it's funny, we don't often talk about music too much.
When it makes an impression, I think we talk about it. But
we do talk about it, but it is, it's a hard thing to kind of tie in all together. I think when we're talking about it, but that is one in particular that I think you even kind of said, that music in particular just really.
Oh man, I bought the soundtrack back in the day when it came out, right? And actually, funny story, really quick. So, occasionally your iPhone, when you're connected to Bluetooth in the car, it just starts playing shuffle for your whole collection, right? I don't know if that happens to you, but it happens to us all the time. And I don't even know how to turn it.
I'm a podcast guy.
Yeah, okay. Well, I am too, but it still sometimes plays. Anyway, point being, for whatever reason, the Shadow of the Colossus soundtrack often comes up when my wife and daughter are in the car, just with their iPhone, because it's a shared collection, and they get so pissed. They're like, Shadow of the Colossus again, guys! So they hate the soundtrack because it comes up randomly all the time, and the nice, tranquil music comes up, and they think I'm listening to Yanni or something. But
meanwhile, you've nicknamed your Prius Agro, so that's that's good.
Well, we've moved on. No more Prius, but yeah.
No more. Oh, I didn't know that. Well,
it's all about Subaru now.
Oh, okay.
In the Pacific Northwest, you have a
yeah,
Subaru.
That's true. Yeah. Anyway, well, let's not make the podcast about our cars, though. I gave my team our Subaru, so I'm still driving my Mini. Yeah, no, it's funny. One of the things that Jonathan called out, and it's come up for us several times already, is that he says that the trilogy must be based off of some book or novel. I mean, I do think there's a lot of literary influence here, and we keep pointing out Paradise Lost in particular, but it is totally suffused with with a sort of Christian stories,
biblical,
biblical stories, and even going to the main menu screen, you've got all these statues that are all like angels and whatever, and if you just sit there, they all kind of turn into vampires, which is a great little touch, and it is that twist on all of that. That's not unique to this, to this particular telling. I've certainly seen vampire as angel as a story before. Like Guillermo del Toro did a trilogy. I think there's a TV show even associated with it, and I think there's some angelic, biblical type stuff in that, and vampires, and so it's come up before. It'll come up again, but yeah, it definitely.
Yeah, it
is interesting. I think it does more than most games do in that vein.
That's what I was going to say. Is I feel like this one has more going on with it. There's more multifaceted, and even though we're not even that far, right? But the history of the world and Nosgoth, and there's a lot of deep lore going on. So I totally see why people glommed onto this franchise at that point. Especially starting with this game again, it sounds like the first one didn't really go that deeply, and I think to his point, and I think probably especially because of the timing of this game for certain people based on your age at the time, I think for games at this time the writing was often not very good, right? And to have something come out that had some thoughtfulness to things like monologues, or to even have good monologues that were talking about any metaphor, and handling it in a good way, was very rare. So I think it probably surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we've also talked about kind of the sort of operatic level that this is working on. I mean, it feels more like a marriage of a video game and an opera to some degree, because it's got kind of Wagnerian scale. Yeah, well, it's also got a giant frickin' organ, which definitely ties in with Phantom of the Opera. But yeah, I mean, it makes me think of Wagner for sure. The Ring of the Nibelung sort of
Faustus.
Faustus, also good. Yeah, so it definitely, and then it kind of marries that to sort of video gamey. It's 7 parts basically with multiple bosses and all that stuff. So yeah, I guess that's as good of any place to kind of put a pin in that and talk about where we're playing to next. But thank you both, Jonathan and Scott, for writing in. You can also, listening now, can also write to us, and we will read your thoughts on the air. And maybe get insight into what I'm working on at devgameclub@gmail.com. But yeah, so what's next?
So we're trying to break it up by boss, and so we have 2 bosses in the next episode, and then the final 2 after that. So the next 2 bosses are we're going to end on Rahab. We believe that's how you say that. So there's. Without spoiling too much, there's one before that, and then you hit Rahab, and then, so stop there. We're not really sure what the hour count is for that, but it's the bosses are a good way to chunk it up.
My understanding from having to figure out what was going wrong with the bell puzzle I was having this week is that the silenced cathedral is actually the largest single level in the game. So I think it'll be a little smoother from here on in. I'm hoping, because that was a big chunk of my Sunday, but and yours and your Monday. But I think that I don't think anything's going to be quite at that scale again. I mean, I think
epic level.
Yeah, one of the things we'll get back to talk about is, you can climb back over this world too at a certain point and go looking for secrets and.
There's a 100% version of this game, right?
Right.
I guess I didn't realize how much there was in that regard because there's a lot of optional stuff that you don't have to find.
Right. Yeah, and that's a key aspect of sort of replayability, and maybe we'll talk about that, next time or the time after that. So in the meantime, you can find us on the web at devgameclub.com. You can send in your comments at devgameclub@gmail.com. But we really do like having the occasional iTunes review to read as well on the show. If you could track down your iTunes and type one in either in the, let's say, less than stellar interface of the iTunes PC store, or on your phone, as others have done with the tiny little keyboards and thick thumb problems. That does really help us find new listeners and kind of promotes the show on Apple's various sort of interfaces. So if you could find your way clear to that'd be great. We like to read those as well, and I think pretty much all the feedback we try to read on the show. So we appreciate having that. You can also find us at Twitter, on Twitter. That's my new service. It's for arrows that I don't even know where I'm going. But
Twitter is for arrows. It's for witty arrows that are 140 inches long.
100, yeah. Oh, good. Oh my God, 140 inch. Oh my God.
Okay, it's too long.
It's more of a javelin, my friend. Yeah. But on Twitter at DevGameClub, where you can find me as well. I'm at Brett_Duville, and he is
at Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And it's clearly time for me to take my twivering butt up to bed. So I will wish you all a good night.
Good night. I think there's a good chance that Twiver becomes a meme of some kind.
Twiver. Yeah, good luck.
Slings and arrows.
Of my outrageous twivering.
Yeah, some Shakespeare in there someplace.
Good times.